Yeah, my name's Professor Mike Kelly and I'm the Director of Public Health at the Centre for Public Health at NICE.
Thank you. Would you be able to summarise in 2 to 3 minutes the talk you gave today?
Yes, I described to the audience the development of evidence-based public health rather than evidence-based medicine. Since 2005, NICE has had a role for developing evidence-based public health guidance where we assess the effectiveness and cost-effectiveness of public health interventions. And I've led the team that has been tasked to do that. And so my talk consisted of a presentation of perhaps 4 or 5 key problems or challenges that have emerged for us over that period since 2005. The critical problems, I suppose, are as follows. First of all, the nature of the evidence is much more diverse and much less well methodologically driven than evidence in clinical medicine tends to be. Translated, that means we've got fewer randomised controlled trials, we've got fewer studies which answer very specific questions about the relationship between interventions and outcomes. So the task of exploring the evidence is much more difficult than simply looking for the 20 trials on this or that pharmacological intervention. So we have a problem with the nature of the evidence. Second, there is a problem which manifests itself in the form of the failure in many primary studies to describe very accurately what the intervention actually was. Or, and linked to that, the intervention is so amorphous and so huge that it's very difficult to pin it down with much precision. And so being able, therefore, to describe what was really done and whether you could replicate it becomes a critical problem. The third issue that I majored on was the degree to which all of this is embedded in a complex web of human behaviours, and those human behaviours are those of the ordinary individuals, of people, practitioners working with them, the system as a whole. And it means that public health activity is embedded in a complex, very complex web of pushes and pulls, which means that looking at the causal pathways from the intervention to the outcome is much more challenging than simply looking at the biological effect of taking an aspirin or something like that. I mean, that's not to say of course biological pathways aren't complicated, of course they are, but on top of that you have this added layer of complexity. The fourth thing that I drew attention to was the fact that in public health we deal with 2 sets of variables. Those which relate to individuals, why you or I might become sick, and those which relate to populations, why particular populations are on average much more unhealthy than others, the question of health inequalities in other words. And I was looking at some of the intricate science you have to do to pull that apart. I finished by talking about the fact that while we've got pretty sound protocols for the analysis of our statistics, for understanding what constitutes a good trial, there is a judgment process also involved in the business of doing science, of doing the kind of things that we do at NICE. And we've been much less sophisticated so far in understanding those judgment processes, the inferences that we use in order to make the judgments we do. And I suggested that perhaps in the next 10 years we should subject those judgment processes to as much scientific scrutiny as we have in the last 30 or 40 to the other parts of the scientific method.
And so what's the opinion of NICE or yourself with regards to how to overcome these 5 issues?
Well, part of it is better research in the first place, and I think we have seen as a consequence, in part at least, of NICE doing this, we've seen an improvement in the way funders, the funding bodies, NIHR, MRC and so on, commission public health research. And I think in the years I've been involved in this, we've seen that's ratcheted up. So it's getting better. With respect to some of the complexities of causation, that's just the hard graft of science. That's what we've got to get on and do. And I think we're getting a bit better at it. And we know more now than we did 25 years ago. But there's still quite a way to go. With respect to the judgment issue, there's a long way to go. And it's a bit hampered by the fact that the old hierarchy of evidence, which has stood us in good stead for recognising what constitutes a good trial, for example, has tended to relegate rather soft-sounding things like judgments and theories to the bottom. And that's in itself not very helpful, because we've got to treat the theoretical process, the judgment process, as seriously as we treat the empirical evidence.
You describe almost amorphous interventions which are so unwieldy that it's hard to pin them down to a description. How do you capture?
Well, you're right, and in part that reflects the fact that sometimes we've been asked to tackle what in effect are major public health problems in search of a solution, rather than specific interventions in search of evidence of effectiveness. So, we've taken some referrals which have asked us to look at big ticket issues like changing health inequalities, for example. And while, of course, you can investigate that, they're not amenable to simple, quick win interventions. So it's not so much they're amorphous, it's some of the problems we've been given to solve have been much, much broader and larger than a typical technology appraisal referral might be.